The most important thing you'll ever know about me is that I am a 12-step working, active member of the Monday Study Alanon group in Louisville, Kentucky. My name is Wilma. Hi. For me, being an Alanon member is my life. It's not something I play at. It's not an auxiliary I belong to. It is the way I live. I do want to thank the committee for inviting me here. I've never been to Shreveport, but I have been in Louisiana before, and it's really nice when you're asked back anywhere. I have to thank Carolyn for all the lovely phone calls, and for Kay for finding me. And those of you who have been seeing that I eat all my meals, thank you, but my goodness, you do feed people well. In my part of the country, we try to tell what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Same program, doesn't matter which end of it you're in. So I just start and go. I'm the oldest of 9 children, and I grew up in poverty before poverty became popular. Last night we heard an AA speaker who started in Kentucky. This morning we heard about a monk from Kentucky. And now you're going to hear about a girl from Kentucky who grew up barefoot, paddyfoot on the concrete in Louisville. And what happened to her as the disease of alcoholism invaded. And that's really what it was. I grew up feeling unloved, unwanted, and unnecessary. And I brought those feelings with me into a marriage that alcoholism was already a part of. My father was a compulsive gambler, and that is an illness quite a bit like alcoholism, but alcoholism wasn't a part of my life. But I grew up always feeling different. I was the odd one. I knew that life didn't have to be the way it was, and I couldn't figure out why it was happening to me that way. I always was alone. I never really fit in anywhere, and I almost died of uniqueness. I really did. You can be so unique that you don't ever look for help because you know there isn't any out there. You're different. Feeling the way I did as a child, I always wanted to be important. I always felt unnecessary and that nobody ever paid any attention to me. And I wanted to grow up and I wanted to be special. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted to be important. I wanted to be something besides this non-entity that I felt I was. And in my part of the world, the furthest thing from my life was opera. And I was going to grow up and be an opera star. But I don't like opera, so I had a problem from the very beginning. I mean, country music's what they played where I came from, so I wanted to be different, right? I wanted to be a star. I never wanted to grow up and get married. My parents divorced when I was 13, and at that time there were 7 living children. And I, being the oldest, had a lot of responsibility, and all I ever saw in my parents' marriage were fighting, not much of my father, being hungry, moving a lot, and always having to take care of somebody's kids. And so I never wanted to get married. But when I was 14, I went to a dance and I met a musician. He had a band, one of the first rock bands in the city, and Don was drunk and I was mightily impressed. You see, he wasn't falling down drunk. He was just macho drunk. Do you know that feeling? That macho? He was everything I was not. He was outgoing, and he could dance like a dream, and everybody liked Don, and he could talk to people, and he knew how to do things. And I was so shy and so introverted and so insecure. I couldn't figure out what the hell he was talking to me for. What interested him? Why was he looking at me? Well, to make this long story short, 2 weeks past my 16th birthday, we got married. Now, I got married for a reason. You see, I was tired of taking care of house and taking care of kids. Smart. I was taught that you don't walk down the street smoking cigarettes, and that good girls don't run away from home. The only way you could get away from home was to get married, and so that's what I did. I could not stand the situation in my home, so I wanted to get out. Well, at this really mature age, Don and I set up housekeeping in a one-room basement apartment. And for the first year, we played house, and we had a lot of fun. Don was a musician, played music 6 or 7 nights a week. He bagged groceries in the daytime for real money. and we both started drinking. Now, I drank right along with him. I tried for a long time to keep up with him, and when I got to the program, I didn't identify with what I thought were not really cookie baking bitches, but housewives. Although I was one, I wasn't one. I was still different. I was still unique. I wasn't what I thought you were. But anyway, we partied a lot. We drank every weekend, most every night, and we had a lot of fun. We really did. It was about 2 years later, when our first child was born, when my problem with the disease of alcoholism began. You see, I'm thoroughly convinced my husband was an alcoholic before I met him. He says so, and I believe him. There's no reason not to. But all of a sudden, somebody had to stay home and take care of this baby, and I was the one elected. And when you're not out drinking with them and you're staying home wondering where they are, you begin to notice how much is being drank. We started having arguments and we started having fights, and the money just wasn't there. And you know how it is when you're living in alcoholism and you got a new baby and a husband doesn't come home. Things are not real pleasant. And I wasn't real pleasant. And I began to look that long ago for answers. I was trying to find a way to change the situation. I didn't know the problem was alcohol or alcoholism. I just thought the problem was Don didn't drink like everybody else and we fought a lot. And if he'd just do it like Charlie did, or if he just drank like Bob or Bill and not do those things, then we'd be okay. Well, we progressed right along like most families do. Time just has a way of going on. We bought a home, moved up in the world, began to have a few things. And while we were having these few things, it's sort of like we're living on two different planes at the same time. On the outside, we seem to be climbing the ladder a little bit. On the inside, where marriage is just going right down the drain, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And one morning, we had a discussion, and Don decided what was wrong with us was me. That I was a complete introvert, and he was an extrovert, and those two didn't fit, so I had to get help for our marriage. And I went down to our local psychiatric clinic to get help. I went every Friday, scared to death somebody was going to think I needed to be there. I mean, I dressed with gloves and my best clothes, and I went and sat. You'd have to see General Hospital to understand what I'm talking about. And I went for a full year. After this year was up, I was really, really disillusioned. You see, it was costing me $3 a visit, so you figure out how long ago that was. I was in Alanon for a long time, taking a fourth step, before I found out why I didn't get any better. It seems that you're supposed to tell these people the truth, and that just really hadn't occurred to me. I was really bitterly ashamed of my childhood and my background and the way I grew up, and I never talked to anybody about it. I hid the way I grew up. I was the one responsible for my husband's drinking. He told me anybody married to a bitch like you'd have to drink, and I believed him. You see, I was turning into somebody I didn't want to be. I had ideals of what a wife and a lady and a woman are supposed to be, and I wasn't filling any of those roles the way I thought they ought to be. I just was nasty inside because I lived in a nasty atmosphere. I lived in a disease called alcoholism, and it was turning me into something I didn't want to be. But I felt responsible for my husband's drinking, and I didn't tell this doctor about what was going on in our home. Part of the therapy was I was supposed to write down my dreams, and I could have some erotic dreams, and I didn't want him to think I was that kind of girl, so I wouldn't tell him that either. I made up stories for a year and expected that man to make me well, and when I didn't get well, it was his fault. Now, I tell you this because it was really important. During this period of time, Don had changed jobs, and he sort of got into the quasi-legal gambling business, and he used to carry a gun. And Don's not a real big man, and he couldn't beat you up, but he'd shoot you. He also used to threaten me with suicide. A lot of us have lived with people who threaten suicide. It used to be they'd say, well, if they say they're going to do it, don't pay attention because they won't. Well, that's a whole different way of thinking about that now. But Don never really did. But he would threaten me if I'd been on his back. He'd say he was going to blow his brains out, and I would immediately apologize to him for whatever he'd done to me, and we'd live happily ever after for a little while. Well, this one particular night, he was really, really drunk, And he said he'd taken out a $10,000 insurance policy, and he was going to blow his brains out, and I was going to be rich the rest of my life. And I said, fine, sounds okay to me, and I walked out of the room. And with that, the gun went off, and he screamed, and a thud hit the floor. And I was very calm. I remember picking up the phone and asking the police to come and get the dead body out of my living room. My husband had killed himself. And he comes running into the bedroom, and he yanked the phone out of the wall. He hung up like that a lot. Well, in the meantime, Don, who was so drunk he couldn't stand up without holding on, had gotten sober just instantaneously. And I used to think he was the only one that had ever done that, but I've since heard a lot of people in AA talk about that. Well, he went out and he got these receipts, my little $3 receipts, and he got the police off in the corner, and he told them the sad story. It ended up they gave him back his gun, told me to straighten up or they'd put me away. That really frightened me. And I have lived with traces of that fear from then on. And I have to admit there's still, deep down inside, part of that fear left. You see, Don had had a lot of DUIs. He'd bribed policemen and bartenders. He'd been to court. He'd been caught embezzling. He'd done a lot of things, and he always came out smelling like a rose. No matter what he did, he got away with it. And no matter what I did, I got caught. And even if I did the right thing, it was wrong at the time. And he would say, you better straighten up, lady, or I'll take the kids away and I'll have you put in an institution. And I knew he could. I never doubted it. Never. And that kind of fear will eat away your insides like a bunch of maggots. I was scared of him. There was a lot of physical violence in my home. I used to get beat up pretty good. But more than the physical violence was the emotional violence. If you've ever lived in fear of another person inside you in your soul, it takes a long time to get over that. The violence in our home, I have to admit, most of the time, if I had just learned to keep my mouth shut, would not have occurred. I didn't know that. I didn't know that putting purple eyeshadow on bruises to make him feel guilty a little longer only added to the situation we were in. Just caught on, didn't you? You see, I used to think if I could make Don feel guilty enough, he would stop drinking. If he loved me enough, he'd stop drinking. I tried everything any of you have ever tried, and probably a few you haven't heard of, to get him to stop drinking like that. It never occurred to me that he could stop drinking, period. Just, I didn't want him to drink the way he drank. You see, I knew when he was sober, he's a nice guy. He really was. He just wasn't sober very often anymore. Due to the disease of alcoholism, and I'm going to condense this, I lost 3 homes. Now, the first house I ever lived in that nobody else had ever lived in was the most important thing in the world to me, because I lived in 67 different houses that I can remember before I was 16. And that's all in one city. We didn't move much. We just moved a lot. We didn't move far. So for me to live in a home of my own was real important. I'm a very materialistic person. And when we lost this house, we lost the house, the furniture, and the car, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. You know that shriveled up feeling inside? You think you can't survive, it hurts so bad? Well, you do live. The fact that they turn your lights and gas off, and that they turn your phone off, and they turn your water off, you think you can't stand it. And the next time you know it's going to kill you, but it doesn't. But that first time was hard. But my husband is a very unique individual. He's been now gotten into the real estate business, and Don is alcoholic, but he's also different. He bought a bigger house. And 2 years later, we lost that house. And we bought a bigger house. And 2 years later, we lost that house. So in actually it was only 4 years, but I lost 3 houses. We seem to have a cycle. My husband is a very hard-working, very bright man, and he's very good at what he does, and he buckles down and he really works hard, and when you work hard, you do progress. Unfortunately, the disease of alcoholism also progresses at the same rate, and it never seemed that we could get too far ahead without losing it all. Somewhere in those years, I had my second child. My first was a daughter, and when Danny was born, I also gave birth to a fear. I had a very deep, serious postpartum depression, and they wanted to put me in the hospital because I was really sick. But like a lot of alcoholics when they're practicing, we never had any hospitalization or insurance. Don wasn't going to give those people his money. And so we couldn't afford to put me in the hospital. And the next best thing was for me to see a psychiatrist. But you see, I had seen a psychiatrist 4 years before that, and I knew they only wanted you $3 a week. They were just a bunch of phonies. After all, they didn't help me. But now it was $50 an hour, so we couldn't afford them anyway. And so my doctor did the next best thing. He put me on tranquilizers. And unbeknownst to him, I was seeing another doctor. I have always had a weight problem, and I'm always trying to lose weight. And so one doctor had given me Dexedrine, the other one had given me tranquilizers. And for the next 3 years, I lived in a brownout. And when we first got to this program, and I heard blackout, I was terrified and didn't know how to tell anybody. I was afraid. You see, I didn't know that I was addicted. And I have to tell you that thanks to being an alcoholic's wife and not paying our doctor bills, I had to find a new doctor when I had another illness. And this new doctor did get me off the pills. But a typical day would be I'd get up in the morning. And of course, I'd been up all night wondering where he was, and so I was really, really tired. And you have 2 kids to take care of, so you have to take one of these little green triangular-shaped pills because they do give you a little energy. So I'm sitting here, and I'm taking the pills, and all of a sudden I'm working real fast and talking real fast, and like I'm walking on the ceiling with the flies, and I can't stand it, and the kids are driving me crazy, so I have to take a tranquilizer because I can't stand it. And pretty soon I'm so tranquil, I'm sitting on the couch, and the kids say, "Mommy, I want," and Mommy says, "Go away, I'm busy." I was busy. I spent years either walking on the ceiling or sitting on the couch, being busy. I was exhausted all the time. My children were ignored. Truly they were. I fed them and I dressed them, but I didn't love them. And I found in Alanon, after I got into my inventory, just how much damage I had done. And it almost devastated me. They were sort of like taken care of like little robots. I didn't have time for my children. I was absolutely and totally obsessed with my husband's drinking. He had a compulsion to drink, and I had an obsession to stop him. And those 2 things don't mix very well. We were fighting all the time, arguing all the time, and yet at the same time, on the same level, we were keeping up the front. I never quite figured out how we managed to do that. But whenever I got the chance to go with him, you better believe I did. I figured it was better to be with him and watch him than stay home worrying about him. Part of the illness, I think that was the most devastating to me, was the loneliness. You see, I've always known that I was different from everybody else. I always knew that somehow there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough. And this, of course, was proof. Society looks down on alcoholics as about the lowest form of life, and my alcoholic looked down on me. It was my fault. I had a long way to go before I even came up to bottom. Don was a daily drinker. He drank away from home, and as his disease progressed, he stayed away more and more. And a typical night would be he'd call and say, "Honey, I'm coming home for supper," and I'd fix something. And then he'd call and say, "Well, I just ran into Bob or Charlie, and I'm going to stop and have a drink." And about 8 or 9 o'clock, he called and he says, "Well, have I missed supper?" By this time, supper, of course, is over, and the kids have been beaten and put to bed. And he'd be on his way. He's coming home right now, throwing something else on in the oven, so I would do that. Along about 2 o'clock, when Don didn't get home, I'd call the bars, the ones that I thought he would hang out at. Always called the bar he always was in last night, and he never was there. Never. And so I'd wait a little bit longer. And along about 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd begin to get afraid. I'd think, well, he's been arrested, and he's probably doesn't remember who he is, because by this time he's doing things and losing his mind, losing his memory. And I'd call the police to see if he'd been arrested. And no, he hadn't been arrested this time. And so I'd lay in bed, and I'd get more and more frightened. And you know that feeling when you shake and the whole bed shakes? It happens to us too, not just alcoholics. We also get the shakes. And I'd lay there and I'd know that he'd had a wreck again. And this time he's probably in a ditch, or maybe he's really badly injured and they can't find his wallet and they don't know where he's at. And my God, I'm going to be a widow, and how am I going to live? And I get so scared, sick, shaking, because I love this man. And I'd lay there and I'd pray, "Dear sir." You see, I had no religious training as a child, and I didn't know God. I knew that, you all knew somebody named God, but I would pray "Dear sir" letters, and I typed my prayers in my mind, and I don't type, and I made mistakes, and I'd have to tear them up and start all over again. I always did promise God if he'd bring Don home safe one more time, I was going to do something good for God. And I was going to take my children to church. I thought that would be good for God. Joe hit it on the head this morning. I would be lying in bed, terrified that something had happened, and full of love, wanting this man to come home so I could take care of him. And God does look after fools and alcoholics, because soon the car would hit the driveway, the door would open, and this loving person who was lying in bed disappeared, and there would be a raving maniac laying there, and I don't know where I went and she came from. That is when most of the violence occurred. Sometimes he would just be mad at somebody out there, and he'd come home and he'd take it out on me. But most of the time he'd come home, and I'd want to know who had he been with, and where had he been, and why had he been there. I would be so full of anger and rage. I'd think I'm going to explode if I don't find out, if I can't make him understand. I just knew if I could find the right way to make him understand, he'd stop. And I would stand in front of a drunk and call him a dirty name and dare him to hit me, and each time he did, I was surprised. I really was. I never learned. I was not real bright. Well, we went on like this until the summer of 1964, I think. That summer was so bad. I was so isolated and so alone. I thought, I can't stand this. By this time, I had already seen a doctor. I had a lot of physical ailments when Don was drinking. They were real ailments, but I know now that they were psychosomatic. I know that they were stress-caused, related to the disease of alcoholism. But this particular night, I thought, I can't take this anymore. I'm tired. Have you ever been so tired that when you got up you didn't have enough strength to stand there and all you could do is just sit back down? When the thought of getting up the next day was more than you could bear? Well, that's how tired I was. I knew that I couldn't do it anymore. I've always been a pack rat. The doctor I had seen who had gotten me off all my pills, and I'm very grateful for that, but I didn't throw them away. They might come in handy someday. And that night they came in handy, and I took them all. Now, I didn't think about killing myself. I did not think about suicide. I didn't think, who's going to take care of my children. I didn't even think, aha, this will show him, which would have been my normal reaction. All I knew was I was too tired to do this anymore. I just couldn't. I just was that tired. My husband used to have an odd little quirk. He used to bring people home with him. And this night he'd been to an after-hours joint, and he brought the whole band home with him like 4 o'clock in the morning, and they found me. I don't know any of those people. I will probably never see them again, but they literally saved my life. I don't know what they did to me. I just know they poured coffee down me. Somebody made me throw up, and they walked me a lot. Obviously, I didn't die. I was not meant to. And there was nothing ever said about it. It was just ignored. And I was real good at ignoring it. Pretend it didn't happen. If you don't talk about it, if you don't admit it, it doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. And so we just went on. We were losing our final home. By this time, I knew it was the final home. Don was no longer employable. And yet we were keeping up our front. We'd gone to a New Year's Eve dance. Can't figure out why we were in the JCs, but he was. And while we were there, Don got his gun out, came into the dance, put it to my head, and pulled the trigger. You see, I had danced with his best friend, and you don't do that when you're married to an alcoholic, in my situation. They got the gun away from him, and we got him home, and he passed out. The next morning, when he woke up, he didn't remember. And I knew he didn't remember. You see, he'd lose cars and not know where they were. Or he'd be gone days and not know where he was. And I knew that that was true. And he was full of guilt and full of remorse. And he cried and he begged me to forgive him, promised me he didn't mean it. And I knew that that was true. You see, I'd wake up and I'd find him hiding in the closet or hiding in the bathroom crying, sick of himself. He didn't want to do the things he was doing. And I'm not here to tell you his story. It was a bad one. He did a lot of things he didn't like, and I knew that he didn't want to be that way. I knew that sober, Don Kessler was a hell of a nice guy. But I knew one more thing. I knew it was going to happen again. And the next time, the clip wasn't going to go in crooked, and I wasn't going to be so lucky. And so I made a decision. We were losing our house. I'd heard of AA, never had heard of Alanon, but I decided I had to do something about me and the children. Now, people used to ask me dumb questions like, why don't you leave? I don't know if any of you all ever been asked that, but I never had a good answer. I didn't know why I stayed. I used to ask myself. I didn't know. Who knows why we do any of those things when we're living? All I can guarantee you is that I got a whole lot sicker than Don did, emotionally. He was hiding from all the pain and the ugliness and the bitterness and the nastiness in a bottle, and I was absorbing it like one big sick sponge. But that night I decided I'd better do something about me and the kids, and I let go. I found a place to move because we had to get out of the house. And Don wasn't coming with me, and he was just as happy to be rid of me as I was to be rid of him. He had told me if I expected to eat, I better get on welfare because there wasn't enough money for me and him both, and his drinking came first. And those are the words he used. He meant it. But the day we walked out of the bank from signing over the house, we physically bumped into Frank. Now, Frank was one of those people that used to make Don drink. I didn't like Frank. I didn't like him a little bit. But Frank was on the wagon, and he just sort of appeared where Don was. For the next 2 or 3 weeks, he'd just show up in whatever bar Don was hanging out at. And it seems that on February the 7th, he took Don to an AA meeting. That was on a Tuesday. On Thursday, we moved. Now, neither one of us remember how we ended up in the same house, because we didn't go to the house I found and we didn't go to the apartment he found. We ended up in a different place. And neither one of us remember how that happened. I can only tell you that it was God's will. On Friday, Frank and Barbara came to pick us up and took us to a meeting, and us didn't want to go. I mean, I had boxes, I had things to do. Besides, you see, I didn't really believe he was going to stay sober, but I knew that if he did stay sober, I wasn't going to have any problems. Nothing. The only thing wrong with us was that he drank too much, and once he stopped drinking, everything was going to be just wonderful. And I believed it. I'm sure you did too. And weren't you surprised? Well, we walked in late. Barbara was also one always late. We walked into a discussion group, and they apparently were discussing, I don't know what they were discussing, but they were talking about their character defects. And I'm sitting here thinking, my God, that's all I need is a room full of sick old women. She had her old men last night, I had old women. They all looked to me like to be 170. They weren't. They probably every bit as old as I was, but they looked older to me. But I've always been a phony my whole life. I couldn't let you know what I thought of you. You might not like me, even though I didn't like you. You had to like me. I took the literature they gave me, went home, smiled at those people, and promptly hid the literature. And I thought, somebody might see it and know. If I didn't tell you, you didn't know, so I had to hide the literature so you wouldn't know about us. Don went to work for Frank. When he quit drinking, we were like $125,000, $30,000 in debt. He went to work for Frank, making $87.50 a week. Frank is a high roller, and he traveled first class to Virgin Islands, New York, Mexico, the Bahamas, Florida, Chicago. He went everywhere. Every other week he was somewhere first class, and I'm staying home paying all these bills on $87.50 a week, and I want you to know I developed a couple of resentments. I really did. Now, Barbara picked me up every Friday and took me to the meeting, and I wouldn't have gone. I really was not interested in going. I didn't want to. I didn't need to. You see, it was his problem. Nothing wrong with me. Ask anybody. I was the good one. I was the one that put up with all that crap. But I've always been a phony, and a strange thing occurred to me during that year. I turned into a parrot. Parrots are dumb birds. People think they're not, but they are. But if you tell a parrot, first things first, easy does it, let go and let God. If you keep repeating that often enough, the parrot's going to say, first things first, easy does it, let go and let God. The trick is the parrot doesn't know what it's saying, and neither did I. I could repeat the words. I'm a fairly intelligent person. I could memorize those 12 steps. I couldn't memorize the Serenity Prayer. I really felt inferior. I couldn't remember that. But I memorized the 12 steps, and I knew what you all were talking about, just didn't apply it to me. And I was real good at parroting back whatever anybody wanted to hear. Well, all this was going on that first year. The year when you're all supposed to be on a pink cloud. Not me, I was on a thunderstorm. Everything that has ever happened in the miracles in my life have always been in the Christmas season. It was the Christmas season the prior year when Don hit his bottom and we were taken to the program. The following Tuesday before Christmas. I always went only one meeting. I went on Friday night. On the following Christmas, and on Tuesday night, Barbara took me to a different meeting because we were going to a party. And while we were there, I met a girl named Mary, and I had never seen her before in my life. But have you ever seen anybody that glows from inside like? Well, Mary looked like this, like somebody plugged her in. But I had made this momentous decision that day. It is not fair, but I have to get a divorce. I could not stand it anymore. Almost a year of sobriety, and I was more miserable than I had been when he was drinking. Not that the things were worse, I was worse. You see, I had blamed everything that was wrong with us on his drinking. This big umbrella, alcohol. And when I took the umbrella of alcohol down, I almost drowned in isms. I really did. All the problems were still there. And I couldn't blame it on Don being drunk. I was dying inside. Going to Alanon every Friday, parroting what you had to say. Well, I met Mary, and I'm telling her how unfair it is and all this big stuff, and I got her in the corner for about a half an hour, and she really listened to me. And I could tell she cared, because she tried to help. She didn't tell me anything about herself. And on the way home, I found out about Mary. She was married to an active alcoholic. He didn't have a job. She had 6 kids, and she lived in the slums I had crawled my way out of. And yet she was working the program with all her might, and it showed. Gratitude will change your attitude if you let it. I went home and thought about, I had everything I'd ever said I wanted. A sober husband, lived in a nice little house. I even had Christmas presents bought. I didn't have to get the basket from the church this year. That's all I ever wanted. Bull. I lied to myself much worse than I lied to you. I hunted up the literature, and I had to hunt for it, found the little guide to the family of the alcoholic, and read it, and said the first real prayer I have ever said in my life, and it was simply the words, maybe. Maybe it is me, too. That was the beginning, 1 full year. You see, when I came to the Alanon program, I was the only one who ever lived this way. Nobody else was going through what I was doing. And I came in, and the first word in the first step says we. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And I wasn't alone anymore. It is so great to be a part of and not apart from. It took me a long time before I could work these steps, but it didn't take me a real long time before I admitted that I was powerless over the alcohol. Alcoholism was something else. And the rest of my life, that's still going on. But I came to this program for a full year before I even came to believe that I had a problem. And it took me a long time after that to come to believe in a power greater than myself. And that power was you. It wasn't a God of my understanding. I believed in the power of the Alanon program, and there were more of you than there was of me, and that's why you were greater. It doesn't say in that step that you have to believe in God. It says in a power greater than yourself. And I knew that the power of the Alanon program could begin to restore me to sanity. A long time before I came to believe in a power that I choose to call God. I got active in the program. I found a new group, by the way. I believed when I came that the person who brought me was my sponsor, and the group that I was taken to was my group. I didn't know I had a choice. choices were not anything I was familiar with. I always did what I was told. I found a new group, and I got active, and I got involved. And over the next 3-4 years, I really did become immersed in the program, and I started working on the program and working the steps to the best of my ability. Miss Alanon bloomed. You know, this is a program of growth, and we do grow. But I bloomed, I ripened, and I rotted, and I fell right off the program. After about 4 years into the program, I became aware that I was having difficulty inside again, that feeling guilty and not knowing what to do, and being afraid and not quite knowing how to talk about it, because after all, I'm the one that they come and talk to. You ask me, you need a problem, you go talk to Wilma, she'll tell you what step to work on. But I didn't have anybody to ask. They might not like me. They might know, they might find out what I was really like inside. They might finally figure out I was still parroting and being a phony. Now, this went on for about 3 months. And I want you to know, I didn't know this at the time. I only discovered these things during the 4th and 5th step, looking back. While it was going on, I just knew that I was afraid and guilty, and I couldn't figure out, my world was sort of getting cattywampus. Well, anyway, Christmas time again. And we had a crisis enter our lives, and I fell apart. I could not cope. And I ended up in our nice nut house on January the 3rd. I went into that hospital, and I did not love my husband. I didn't want my kids. I sure as hell didn't believe in Alanon, and God didn't really live. You know that big aching hole you talk about? Those of you who are alcoholic, that hole in the middle of your stomach with the wind blowing through? Some of us get it too. That's how I felt. I was so empty, and at the same time so full of pain and so full of fear, I didn't know what to do. I came as close to falling off the edge as you can come. But we went into the hospital, or I went into the hospital, and after the first 3 days, I had no medication. I was honest enough to tell the doctor that I get hooked on pills real easy, so I didn't have any medication. And I had no shock treatment. I was in there for 2.5 months, and what I finally had was a 4th and 5th step, the very first one I'd ever talked. You see, I went from the first part of the 1st step to the carrying the message in the 12th step, and I didn't do any of that other nonsense. I just talked about it. You cannot be an active member of Alanon talking about it. You've got to live it. I don't think you can retain your sobriety if you don't live it. I know I cannot retain my sanity if I don't live it. Well, I came out of that hospital, and I was different. Something very precious had been taken from me, and I was different. But God doesn't take something away from you unless He gives you something better. And what He gave me literally were your children. I was asked to sponsor an Alateen group, and there was no one in this world less qualified to be an Alateen sponsor than me. I didn't like teenagers. I had one of my own, and I would have given her to anybody that would have taken her. But I had been taught in this program that you don't say no unless you have a good reason, and an excuse is not a reason. And so I started out on a 9-year growth adventure. I had to study the literature. I had to dig into it just to stay a half a step ahead of these kids. Believe me. Walking into that Alateen room was the first time in my life I ever felt loved. I guarantee you, the very first time I ever felt loved. And it was the first time I ever loved somebody back without wanting something in return. Our children are very special. When I say our, I mean those of us in the program. The kids who live through the hell that we put them through. They're like little sponges. They are capable of great love and great pain and a lot of frustrations. I learned in learning to love your children and deal with your children how to deal with mine. I, too, sponsored both of my children through Alateen, and I'm here to tell you it will work if you work at it. In the Alateen meeting, I was their sponsor, not their mother. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me in this program. I still get letters from my kids. They'll always be my kids. No matter what. I got a kid out in Arizona. Every Mother's Day, I get a Mother's Day card from Tommy. You couldn't pay me enough money for the feeling I get from that. From this poor little boy that nobody wanted, who found a home in Alateen, who found a lady who needed desperately to love somebody. I can't thank you enough for that gift. All during this time, things were not really wonderful. I was working on the steps, working them to the best of my ability, and I think our ability changes We learn to do a lot of things. But all through this time, I felt cheated. You see, I didn't have a happy marriage. I didn't have what I knew every other one of you had. Everybody else in the program was happy in their relationship with the man of their choice or the woman of their choice, but not me. Don and I never seemed to quite get it together. It was like having a globe, and 90% of my world was full with my program, and I've been involved in service almost from the beginning, with the Alatines, with my children, with everything. And I had a 10% that was my marriage, which was a mess. There came a time in my life, I thought, I've tried everything I could think of. I tried everything I could think of. And I just wasn't happy with this relationship. And so I woke up one morning and I said, okay, God, if it's supposed to be this way, then it's going to be this way. If I'm supposed to get a divorce, you're going to have to lead me to it. If I'm supposed to stay married, you're going to have to show me how. Whatever it is I'm supposed to do, I'm going to do it. And that moment, I took the third step. You see, I had been getting up every morning and taking the third step. I thought. I really was. I practiced at it. I got down on my knees and I said the words, but I didn't have that inside feeling. But when I made a decision that God was the one that was going to decide whether I was going to stay married or not, I really took the third step. Completely and totally and unequivocally. And I began on a process that led me where I thought He wanted me to go. Up until this time, I had never been able to pay a dinner check. I didn't know how to do those things. I mean, that was a man's job, right? There are women's job and men's job, and I didn't know how to do those men's jobs. And part of it, how do you figure out how much to tip? Now, that might sound silly to you, but to me it was important. But I began to be led in what I thought was a way of learning how to be independent and to become my own person. I went back to school. At 16, I never got out of high school, so I went back and got a high school education, got a couple of years of college under my belt until my children started and I couldn't afford to go back. I began to speak. I started learning how to travel by myself. I learned how to go to a movie by myself. I do a lot of things by myself. And that was okay. And I knew I was being led toward a divorce. And that was okay. Because I think I talked about that the last time I was here. I'd get up every day and I'd make a decision. Today I'm going to stay married. And as long as it was my choice, it was okay. As long as I felt like I had to and had no choice, I couldn't stand it. I was dying inside miserable. But it was my choice. I was all right. I had worked on a fourth step. I've done many since that very first one. I did another fourth and fifth step. And I made my searching and fearless moral inventory of myself. The first one was not like that. You see, I don't believe that a searching and fearless moral inventory is necessarily a list of all the things I had done. It's a list of what I am, good and bad. I grew up not knowing I had any good. It was all negative. And so for me to have an inventory of both my good characteristics and my bad characteristics, not excluding the things I had done, to do a fifth step, to admit to God, to myself, and to another human being the exact nature of my wrongs, is not a recitation of all the sins I have committed. You see, the exact nature means I have to know the reasons and the motives behind what I have done. When I was looking at my inventory, I kept repeating the same thing down through the years. The same pattern kept showing up. And I was doomed to keep on repeating that pattern until I find the reasons why. It doesn't matter that when I was 6 years old, I stole a can of pineapple. It doesn't matter that I continued that pattern on through my life. What I needed to know was, why did I do it? The fact that I was hungry was one reason. The fact that I was greedy. The fact that I wanted it. There were a lot of reasons, motives behind what I did. That to me is the exact nature of my wrongs, and I had to dig those things out. I can make a long list of what I did, but that didn't help. I had to know why. It took me a long time to become entirely ready to have God remove my shortcomings or my defects of character. I know a defect now is just a little thing wrong with something. It doesn't mean that I am worthless. It means that in my character something got screwed up and this part of it's cattywampus and I need to fix it. And I can't do it. I had to be willing. I was real afraid that if God removed all my defects of character, I was going to stand here a piece of white paper. a new piece of paper, I truly didn't want to become a saint. I was afraid I'd get so good I couldn't stand myself. And so it took me a while to get to the point where I was willing to have God remove these defects of character. But there comes a time when they hurt enough, you will ask. And when they hurt enough, I did ask. I know I'm never going to be perfect. I don't even want to be. But I don't want to hurt the way I hurt. I don't want to keep hurting others the way I hurt them. My defects of character don't just involve me. They involve all the members of my family and all the people who interact with me. And so in order to stop hurting other people, I had better learn how to get rid of some of these. And the only way I know is to ask God to do them. I cannot do it alone. I am a very strong-willed person. I have a lot of willpower. I don't have a lot of want power. I want what I want when I want it. And, I don't like waiting. And I've always been able to do whatever it is I wanted to do, except change myself. I have to ask the God of my understanding to do it for me. When I made the list of all the persons I had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all, that's when I ran into my children first. My children were there, my husband was there, I was there, my parents, my family, a whole lot of people were on that list. But when I really realized that I was the one that had done the most damage to my children, it really was like running into a wall full of bricks. You see, I thought it was his fault. It was his fault that my daughter was terrified all the time. The fact that she ducked when I raised my hand never occurred to me. It was me she was afraid of. But it was because her father was a drunk. 90% of the damage done to the children in alcoholic situations are done by the non-alcoholic. I don't mean physical damage, I mean emotional damage. And as an Alanon sponsor, I'll tell you that that's the truth. And I'm not saying done by mothers or fathers, I'm saying non-alcoholic parent or partner. There were a lot of people on that list, and I made a lot of amends. There were a lot of people on that list that I wasn't willing to make amends to, and I still got some on that list that God hasn't nudged me enough yet. One of the things I learned back there in the 6th step about my defects of character, one of the characteristics I've always had is I always wanted to be better. I just really didn't want to get better. And there is a difference. Being better just implies it's going to happen to me. Getting better means I've got to work at it. And the working at it I've got to do is making my list and making my amends. Excuse me. In the 10th step, we made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. The step says made direct amends. It doesn't say tell people you're sorry. And for me, to amend a thing is to change it. I was real good at saying I'm sorry. I was sorry for everything. I was sorry I cooked the wrong egg, you know that old joke? I was sorry if it rained. I was sorry if he said something to hurt your feelings. Oh, I'm sorry. I was about the sorriest thing ever come down the pike. But I wasn't real good at amending things. 6 years ago, I was away with a group of kids in, I think I was in Washington, D.C. I got a phone call. And boy, did it come home to me close last night. My mother was going to have emergency surgery, and would I come home? I had made amends to my mother. I told her I was sorry. But you know that inside feeling when you know that's not enough and there's still some unfinished business going on? I had a real bad relationship with my mother. I blamed her for my childhood. I blamed her for the kind of person I turned out to be, and it just wasn't a good relationship. But I told her I was sorry for some of the nasty things I said to her. But when I got this phone call and had to come home, my mother had brain cancer. And for the next 6 months, 5 days a week in her home, I took care of her. I had to go into the house that I couldn't stand to walk into because I had such horrible memories there. And I was given the greatest gift, the opportunity to make amends to my mother. It was the hardest 6 months I have ever endured. And I am very, very grateful for them. Because my mother was really, really bad. I learned to feed her. I learned to change her clothes and to change her diaper. And I cared for her the way she cared for me when I was a baby. And I could amend the way I felt. And when my mother was about to die, I prayed for her to die. Because I knew that I loved my mother. And I knew that she knew it. If she had died without my having made those amends, I don't think I could have survived it. It took a lot. If you have something eating inside of your soul like I had eating inside of mine, don't wait till it's too late. That's the most dramatic amend I've ever had to make, but it's not the most important. I've had to learn how to love my children. I've had to learn how to love my husband. I've had to learn how to love myself. But when you amend a thing, you change how you are with it. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Continued implies that you've done it before, that you keep on doing it. You see, I find if I don't keep up with where I am, then I'm where I don't want to be. I have to know what I'm doing. And I don't do this every night. I hear people in the group talking about do my daily inventory every night. I don't. I tend to be a lazy person. But I need to know where I'm coming from. And it's much, much easier for me to admit I'm wrong when I'm wrong and take care of it than have to put somebody back on that amends list and go through all that hassle again. So I just take care of it while I'm there. It was really hard for me to be wrong with my husband. I learned in Alanon how to be wrong with my children, and I think that's one of the greatest gifts I've ever given them, was a parent who is wrong, a parent who makes mistakes and admits it, a parent who can screw up and keep on going. And my children learned that it's all right for them to make mistakes and keep on, as long as they go back and try to take care of it. But for me to admit I'm wrong to my husband was really, really difficult, especially when we're not getting along too good. One of the things that has occurred in the last few years is that my husband is no longer active in the program. Don's been sober, if we make it till February, will be 22 years. That's a long time. But for the last 4 or 5 years, he hasn't been involved in the program. He goes to meetings sometimes when he feels like one. He gets up every morning and he reads his 24-hour book, and he keeps the literature handy, and he reads it, and he practices the program in all of his business affairs. But it makes a difference in the home. It makes a big difference because all of our social life was in the program. Everybody we ever did anything with was in the program. And I feel left out. I'm not left out. They don't leave me out, but I feel left out because we're no longer a couple in a part of that. It's kind of an empty feeling. When he had his 20th birthday, he didn't have a group to celebrate it in. And I cried. I was so hurt. 20 years of sobriety was a heck of a milestone. And we didn't have any place to go and nobody to celebrate it with, and it hurt. The only thing I can do about that is keep myself really close to my meeting. The only thing I can do about that is work the 12 steps to the best of my ability for myself. I can't work them for him. I'm not afraid he's going to get drunk, because if I start being afraid, I'm lost. But it does make a difference in how we live. And so for me to admit when I'm wrong to a person who's not working the program is hard. But for my own self-esteem, I have to do that. I have to practice the program on my husband a whole lot harder than I have to practice it on myself. I do know that the freedom I feel inside is a direct result of working the program, the discipline of this program. It really is. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. It's real, real hard to accept God's will when you're afraid. Again, another Christmas time. Be 3 years come this Christmas. 4 years. Anyway, Don and I had gone to Florida for Christmas, and we took our next door neighbors. They went with us. You know that feeling when two people can't be in the you can't even be in the car by yourself because you can't talk? Don and I couldn't stand to be in the same room to each other very long because we didn't have anything to talk about. So we took Chuck and Martha to Florida with us so we didn't have to talk to each other. You've been there, huh? It's a very painful place to be. They could only stand it for a few days. They left. And on Christmas Eve, Don and I are sitting out in the patio in Florida. And we decided when we get back to Louisville, we're going to get a divorce. You see, we kind of even loved each other when we made that decision. I felt closer to him than I'd felt for a long time. I wasn't happy about it, but I was relieved. And I knew that this was God's will, or at least that's what I thought. And so we sort of sat and held hands and talked about, I was going to get this and he was going to get that. Pleasant to each other. The most pleasant and the most comfortable we've been in a long time. Alanon and AA does not guarantee to save your marriage. It only guarantees to save your soul and your sanity if you'll let it. But a strange thing had occurred. The people that went to Florida with us, our next door neighbors, also happened to be my doctor, and I had developed a real bad limp. And Chuck said, Wilma, when you get back to the house, get back to Louisville, come over and let me take an x-ray of you. He'd been treating me for bursitis. Well, when I got back, I went and got an x-ray, and then he said, well, baby, better go to the hospital and get a little CAT scan. So I got a CAT scan. He says, maybe better do a little surgery, and they did a little surgery, and I have bone cancer. After the first 20 minutes, when pure, blind panic takes over, and all I could think of was, I'm going to die. My mama died, and I'm going to die, and I don't want this. You have to accept God's will. The only thing, I heard a voice, truly did, says, call Ruth. Ruth is my sponsor. And then I called Ruth, and within 20 minutes, they were there. They being my little group. We all have groups within groups within groups. Well, my little group was there. And they loved me, and they supported me, and I cannot tell you how it happened, but the panic disappeared. The blind panic disappeared. The fear didn't go away. When I took the third step, I really didn't expect my life to be wonderful. That's not why I took it. And I hear people say if you work the program, everything will be okay. Well, I want you to know it ain't okay. But I am. There is a knowing inside of me that I am going to be all right. Because I learned to pray and meditate and ask for God's will. And I asked for his help for one day only. Well, a strange miracle occurred. 2 miracles. One thing, I went through radiation, and I went through all those things. And I just 2 weeks ago had another bone scan, and I don't have a sign of cancer. I'm clean. I'm fine. That's one big miracle, and I'm very grateful. But the second miracle, the one that occurred prior to that, was that Don and I didn't get a divorce. You see, he was there for me. When I really needed him, he was there. He was everything that I needed. He was strong, he supported me, he loved me, he cared for me, and I couldn't have stood it on my own. God had other plans. I just think I know what his will is. All I have to do is seek through prayer and meditation and follow what I think is given to me, and it will be God's will. If I start getting my own will in it, I'm in trouble. I know that during this time I learned how to live truly one day at a time. I've always thought I lived a day at a time, and for the most part I do. But I can guarantee you I can live a day. Some days it's painful, and other days it's beautiful, and I can enjoy both of them. I learned that I don't have to wait till tomorrow, that I have what is right here and right now. God is doing for me what I cannot do for myself. He has gotten me through things that were impossible to get through. The most important thing, and I think for me the greatest step, is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We try to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I have had a spiritual awakening, and it is guaranteed to be a result of working the previous 11th step. I am a spirit. I had no spirit when I came to this program. I didn't know anything about a spiritual life. I knew nothing about a relationship with God. I knew nothing about having a relationship with people. As a result of working these steps, I am a spirit awakened to myself, and I like it. I think I'm a success. I like myself. I couldn't stand me when I came in here, and I knew if you found out about me, you wouldn't like me either. Today, I know I'm what I'm supposed to be. Warts, blemishes, halos, wings, horns, you name it. I'm not anything except what I'm supposed to be today. And God loves me that way, so I darn well better learn to do it myself. To carry the message, the only message I have is the message of me, Wilma Kessler, and this is what happened to me, and this is how it was. And it might not be that way for you, and that's okay. You try it. If it doesn't work for you, we'll try something else. The hardest part is to practice these principles in all my affairs. My affairs happen to be my family and my friends and my business. My affairs happens to be you. It's real easy for me to be an Alanon meeting member sitting on Monday study with all the other good Alanon members. I can carry on a real good discussion. It's a whole lot harder when I have to go home. When I live in a house and my husband's been in Florida for a month and I haven't seen him, my cat died and my kids are sick and I'm lonely and I don't like it this way, it's real hard to be a good Alanon member when you're feeling sorry for yourself. The only thing I can do is to go to the very beginning and start all over and realize that I am powerless over alcohol, that my life has become unmanageable, and go through all the 12 steps again. There is no one time. It is from now on. It is a big evolving circle. I feel real comfortable and real at home right now. I came to Louisiana. I didn't know if I knew any of you or not. But I knew that if you were what I am at home, a member in one of our 3 programs, that I was at home. You have made me feel warm and loved and welcomed. And I guarantee you, if you ever come to Kentucky, you're going to find the same thing, whether you're an AA, Alanon, or Alateen. We are all from the same program. God has given us things that the rest of the world only dreams about. I'm glad you shared yours with me. And I'm glad to share mine with you. Thank you.